The hospital smelled like bleach and bad news. Nadia Reeves had been sitting in that same plastic chair for 6 hours, and in 6 hours she had not cried once. She told herself it was because she was strong. But the truth she would only admit to herself at 2 in the morning when the twins finally fell asleep, was that she had simply run out of tears somewhere around month 4 of fighting insurance companies, month 7 of second opinions, and month 9 of watching her children shrink. Kai and Zoe were 5 years old. They had her nose and someone else's eyes dark, almost black, with a stillness in them that made strangers stop and stare. They laughed at everything. They finished each other's sentences. They slept holding hands, even now, even here, in a hospital bed surrounded by machines that beeped every 4 seconds like a metronome counting down something Nadia refused to name. Dr. Vasquez pulled a chair across the linoleum and sat down in front of her. He was a small man with kind eyes, and the voice of someone who had delivered terrible news so many times that he had developed a whole separate register for it. Lower, softer, measured. "Nadia," he said, "the bone marrow registry came back." She already knew from his face, but she let him talk. "There's no match. Not nationally, not internationally. The condition is rare enough that compatible donors are," he paused. "The most viable path forward is a biological relative, a parent, a sibling, someone who shares the genetic architecture." "I'm not a match," she said. "We already tested that." "Your side of the family, yes. We need to test the father's side." The word landed between them like a stone, dropped into still water. Nadia said nothing for a long time. Outside the room, a cart wheeled past. A child somewhere down the hall laughed, and the sound was so out of place that it felt almost violent. "The father," she finally said, "is not in the picture." "I understand. But Nadia," Dr. Vasquez leaned forward slightly, "without a matched donor we are looking at a 6-month window, maybe less. The marrow is failing faster than we projected, if there is any way to locate him." "There is." She said it with such finality that he stopped. Then she stood, smoothed her jacket, and walked back into the room where her children were sleeping, and she sat between their beds and held both their hands at once, and she still did not cry. Her best friend, Simone, was waiting in the parking garage. Simone was the kind of woman who showed up, always had been, since college, since the miscarriage before the twins, since the night Nadia came home from a business trip to find her apartment empty except for a note from a man named Marcus Webb that said simply, "I'm sorry. I can't explain." "Well," Simone said. Nadia got into the passenger seat and stared through the windshield. "They need the donor to be biological, father's side." Simone was quiet. "Don't," Nadia said. "I didn't say anything." "You were going to say, so find him." "I was going to say, so what do we do?" Simone said carefully. "Because there's a difference between those two sentences, and I know you know that." Nadia pressed her fingers against her eyes. 5 years. 5 years of building walls around that chapter of her life, mortaring every brick with rage and silence, and the relentless forward motion of raising 2 children alone. And now someone was asking her to knock it all down. "His name wasn't even real," she said quietly. "The name he gave me, Marcus Webb, I looked. The company he said he worked for, it didn't exist. The address on his business card was a mail forwarding service. He was a ghost, Simone, a ghost who got me pregnant and disappeared." "I know," Simone said, "I know." They sat in the parking garage for a long time. Then Nadia's phone lit up on the dashboard, a news notification. She almost ignored it, but the face on the thumbnail, the dark eyes, the jaw she had spent 3 months memorizing, stopped her cold. She grabbed the phone with both hands. The headline read, "Reclusive billionaire Weston Crane resurfaces to lead Crane Global after father's death." The photo was 5 years older than the man she remembered. The jaw was sharper. The hair was cut close on the sides now. He was standing in front of a glass tower in a suit that cost more than her car, and he was looking directly at the camera with an expression that said he had spent years learning to look at things without flinching. But the eyes were the same eyes her children had. "Simone," Nadia said, and her voice came out very strange and very flat. "I found him. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because this story is only getting started, and you do not want to miss what happens next." She remembered everything about the summer she had tried to forget. She had been 28, working as a junior project manager for a consulting firm, and Marcus Webb had walked into the office kitchen one Tuesday morning and asked if the coffee was any good. She had told him it was terrible. He had poured himself a cup anyway and said, "I've had worse." And then he had smiled at her, and that was the beginning of the end of her good sense. He said he was a management consultant. He said he was in town for 3 months on a project. He was charming in a way that felt private, not the loud, showy charm of men who needed an audience, but something quieter, like he was only turning it on for her specifically. For 3 months they were inseparable. He cooked for her on Sunday nights. He remembered small things, the tea she liked, the book she mentioned once in passing, the name of the street she'd grown up on. He was careful and attentive in a way that, in retrospect, she would recognize as the attentiveness of someone who was always managing information. He never brought her to where he lived. She never met anyone who knew him. He had explanations for everything. Traveling consultants don't settle. He was between apartments. His friends were all in other cities. She was 28 and in love, and she accepted every explanation like a gift. Then one Friday he said he had to fly to Singapore for a client meeting. He kissed her at the door of her apartment. He said he'd be back in 10 days. He was not back in 10 days. She called, disconnected. She emailed. No reply. She went to the office he'd been working at and found it locked, the nameplate on the door blank, the consulting firm's website suddenly offline. She asked around. Nobody knew a Marcus Webb. The woman at reception said the office had been a temporary lease by a company called Meridian Group, and Meridian Group did not appear to exist in any business registry she could find. 2 weeks after he disappeared, she took a pregnancy test because she was late and she was stressed, and she expected it to be negative. It was not negative. She had spent 5 years in the aftermath of that moment. 5 years of accepting that she would never have answers. That Marcus Webb, whoever he really was, had chosen to vanish, and she had no leverage, no proof, no trail. Just 2 children with his eyes and a silence where a father was supposed to be. And now she was sitting in her car in a hospital parking garage, looking at the face of Weston Crane, and she was doing the math, and the math was making her hands shake. The Crane building was 42 stories of glass in the financial district, and it had a lobby that was designed to make ordinary people feel small. Nadia knew this because she stood in it the next morning and felt it working on her. She had dressed carefully. She wore her sharpest blazer, the one she saved for depositions. She had her paralegal badge from the firm she worked for. She had a plan. The plan lasted approximately 4 minutes. "Ma'am, Mr. Crane does not accept walk-in meetings," the receptionist said, and she was polite in the specific way that meant, "I have said this to 100 people like you, and I will say it to 100 more. I have urgent legal business regarding a matter that affects. You can email the general counsel's office. I can provide that address. This is a medical emergency. I understand the address is. I need to speak to him directly." The receptionist's expression did not change. "Security can assist you with the exit if you're having trouble finding it." Nadia found the exit herself. She stood on the sidewalk in the November wind and looked up at 42 floors of glass and thought about Kai's hand in hers and Zoe, and the beeping machine and 6 months, and she thought, "Fine. The easy way didn't work. Let's try the other way." She called Simone. "I'm outside," she said. "I need you to look something up. There's a gala tonight, a charity event. Crane Global is one of the sponsors. I saw it in the lobby. Find me the details. Nadia. Find me the details, Simone. A pause, keyboard clicks. It's at the Meridian Hotel. Black tie. Guest list is obviously we're not on it. No, Nadia said, but I know how to get in. She had spent 7 years as a paralegal before she'd had the twins, and those 7 years had taught her that almost every system had a side door. Not an illegal one, just a door that existed because systems were built by humans, and humans always left a gap between the rule and the enforcement of the rule. The gap tonight was the vendor entrance. She spent the afternoon on the phone, calling the hotel's events coordinator as a representative of a floral company that had a standing relationship with Crane Global's event planning firm. A relationship she had fabricated using 3 LinkedIn profiles, a fake email domain set up in 20 minutes, and the very specific authoritative tone she used when she was deposing witnesses who didn't want to talk. By 4 o'clock she had a vendor badge. By 7 o'clock she was in. Simone had lent her a black dress. It was the kind of dress that made people assume you belonged wherever you were wearing it. She moved through the gala like she had somewhere to be, which she did. She found him in a private corridor near the event space, talking to a man in a gray suit, security nearby. She didn't let herself think about what she was doing. She just walked up to him. Weston Crane. He turned, and the moment she said his name, she watched something move through his face, something fast and controlled, a flicker of recognition that he locked down in under a second. He was better at this than she remembered, more practiced. The man she had known as Marcus Webb had been warm underneath his secrecy. The man standing in front of her now had learned to keep the warmth somewhere no one could reach it. "I'm sorry," he said smoothly. "Do we know each other?" "We do," she said. "But you might remember me better if I tell you that the last time we saw each other, you said you were going to Singapore." The man in the gray suit glanced between them. Weston Crane made a small, subtle gesture, and the man in the gray suit moved away with the practiced discretion of someone paid to exercise it. Then there was just the two of them, in a corridor, with string music coming from the event space and 5 years hanging in the air between them. "How much?" he said. She stared at him. "Whatever you want," he said, his voice dropping low and controlled. "We can arrange a settlement. There are NDAs. We can make this go away quietly and—" "Stop," she said. He stopped. "You think I want money?" Something shifted in his expression. Not softness, not yet, but a crack in the architecture of his certainty. "I don't want your money," she said. "I want your blood." The silence that followed was complete. "I have 2 children," she said, and she was proud of how steady her voice was. She had practiced this in the car, but practicing it and saying it were different things, and she had not expected the way it would feel to say it out loud to him, the weight of it, the accumulated mass of 5 years of doing it alone. They are 5 years old. They are sick. They need a bone marrow transplant, and there is no match in the registry, and the only chance they have is a biological relative, and you are their father. Weston Crane said nothing. His face had gone very still. "I have documentation," she said. "I have their birth dates, their medical records, everything. I'm not here to destroy you. I'm not here for a settlement. I'm here because my children have 6 months, and you are the only person on the planet who might be able to save them, and I need you to take a test." He looked at her for a long time. Then very quietly he said, "What are their names?" If you're feeling something right now, hit that like button, because this story deserves to be seen, and we're not even close to done. She told him. Kai and Zoe. She told him about Kai's obsession with dinosaurs and Zoe's habit of correcting adults when they got facts wrong. She told him they had his eyes. She said it flatly, as a medical observation, not as an accusation, though it was both. She told him what the doctors had said. She told him the timeline. He listened without interrupting, which was not what she had expected. "I didn't leave," he said when she was finished. She laughed. It came out short and humorless. That's what you want to open with. I'm not asking you to believe it, he said. I'm telling you because it's true, and at some point, not tonight, not now, it will matter. He looked away for a moment, something moving behind those dark eyes. I was pulled out. My father, the old CEO, found out about us. He had me on a plane to a facility in Switzerland within 48 hours. No phone, no contact. By the time I had access to communication again, 6 months had passed. And everything had been, he stopped. There was a report from someone my father paid that said you had been compensated, that you had signed documents and moved on. I never signed anything, Nadia said. I know that now. You didn't look very hard. He flinched. It was small, but she saw it. No, he said, I didn't. That is the part I can't defend. She studied him. She had spent 5 years building a version of this man in her head, a villain, cold and calculating, a man who had used her and walked away. And standing in front of the real one, she found something more complicated and in some ways more infuriating. A man who had made choices and knew he had made them and was not trying to escape that knowledge. Will you take the test? She said. Yes. Your lawyers are going to try to stop you. Yes. And they work for me, he said, not the other way around. The lawyers did try to stop him. Nadia found this out 3 days later when she got a call from a number she didn't recognize. And a woman's voice said she was calling from the office of Crane Global's general counsel, and that Mr. Crane was not in a position to submit to paternity testing at this time, given the sensitive nature of ongoing corporate transactions and the potential legal implications of. Nadia hung up. She called Weston directly. He had given her his number in the corridor quietly, before his security had materialized at his elbow and the moment had ended. Your lawyers called me, she said. I know, I've been informed. A pause. I'm handling it. Define handling it. I have a meeting with the board tomorrow. I'll have more information after that. Weston, she said, and using his real name felt strange and sharp-edged. My children do not have time for board meetings. I know that. Do you? Nadia, his voice was quiet. I know I'm not choosing the company over them. I need you to give me 72 hours. She pressed her hand flat against the kitchen counter. In the other room, Simone was reading to the twins. She could hear Zoe interrupting to correct something, and Kai's giggle, and the ordinary sound of it was so unbearable right now that she had to close her eyes. 72 hours, she said, and then I go public. A pause. Understood, he said. He came to the hospital on the second night. She hadn't told him to. She found out later that Simone had sent him the room number, Simone, who would receive a lengthy lecture on boundaries at a later date, except Nadia never quite got around to giving it. She was in the hallway getting coffee when she saw him step off the elevator. He was wearing a plain dark jacket and no tie, and he looked, for the first time, like someone who had not planned what to do with his face. He stopped when he saw her. They looked at each other across 12 feet of hospital linoleum. They're sleeping, she said. I know, he stopped, started again. I needed to see them. She thought about saying no. She thought about a lot of things in that moment, about 5 years of bedtime stories told alone, and first steps he'd missed, and fevers she'd managed by herself at 2 in the morning, and every single time she'd watched them look at other fathers and not say anything. She stepped aside. He walked past her, quietly into the room. She stood in the doorway and watched him look at them. Watched the moment it hit him. The moment he saw Zoe's nose, which was his nose, and Kai's hands, which were his hands, and the eyes, closed in sleep, which were unmistakably, undeniably his. She watched whatever he had built around himself come apart. Not loudly. Just quietly, like a structure that had held for years, finally acknowledging the weight it had been carrying. He stood there for a long time. When he turned back to her, his eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it, which surprised her. "I'm sorry," he said, and it wasn't the sorry of someone managing a situation. It was the sorry of someone who had finally, fully understood what they had lost. "I'm so sorry, Nadia." She didn't say it's okay because it was. She didn't say I forgive you because she didn't yet. She said, "Take the test. That's all I need from you right now." He nodded. He took the test the next morning. The results came back in 4 days. Dr. Vasquez called her at 8 in the morning, and she was standing at the window of the hospital room, watching Kai try to teach Zoe a card trick. And she answered the phone, and he said the words, and she had to sit down on the floor. He was a match, 100% for both of them. She called Weston. He picked up on the first ring. "It's you," she said. "You're the match." The silence on the line lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then he said very quietly, "Tell me when and where." If you're still here, you are absolutely Team Kai and Zoe. Drop it in the comments right now. Team Kai and Zoe, let's go. And then the grandfather arrived. His name was Harlan Crane, and he was 71 years old and had spent 40 of those years building Crane Global into something that required a man like him to run it. Someone who understood that sentiment was a liability, and that family, in the end, was just another resource to be managed. He arrived at the hospital in a car that cost more than the building Nadia lived in, flanked by 2 lawyers, and an expression that had never, in its entire existence, been moved by anything it didn't choose to be moved by. He found Weston in the consultation room, signing consent forms for the procedure. "Don't," Harlan said. Weston looked up from the forms. "This is a scam," Harlan said. "I've seen it before. A woman appears with a story, a child appears with an illness." "There are 2 children, Father," Weston said, "and I've seen their DNA. DNA can be manipulated. The board. The board doesn't vote on my medical decisions. The board votes on anything that affects this company, and if it comes out that you have illegitimate—" "Don't," Weston's voice was quiet and completely absolute. "Don't call them that." Harlan's lawyers shifted. The older one, a man named Birch, who Nadia had been told later had worked for the Crane family for 30 years, put a hand on Harlan's arm and murmured something. "I am telling you," Harlan said, "that if you go through with this, the ramifications for the company will be significant," Weston said. "I know." He looked at his father for a long moment. "I also know that you told me she took a payment and moved on. I know that was a lie, and I know that I should have looked harder and I didn't, and those children grew up without a father because of decisions that you and I both made. You were 26. I was old enough to know better, and you were old enough to know that what you did was wrong." Weston set down the pen and stood up. "I'm going through with the procedure. If the board wants to remove me as a result, they can try. But I am done managing this family like it's a liability." He walked past his father and out of the room. Harlan Crane stood there for a moment, looking at the consent forms on the table. Then Birch touched his arm again, and this time Harlan let himself be steered toward the door. Nadia, who had witnessed all of this from the hallway, because she was a paralegal and knew how to stand very still in hallways, waited until they were gone. Then she walked into the consultation room and looked at the signed consent forms. She picked up the pen he had set down, and she signed hers. The surgery was on a Thursday. Simone sat with the twins during the procedure, read them every book they had brought, played cards, ordered hospital cafeteria food that Zoe pronounced scientifically bad, and that Kai ate without complaint. Nadia alternated between the waiting room and the hallway and the small hospital chapel that she wasn't sure she believed in but visited anyway, because there is a particular kind of moment in life that requires you to stand somewhere quiet and admit how small you are. Weston was in the procedure for 4 hours. The collection was outpatient. He would recover in a day. The transplant itself was the longer battle. The marrow needed to take, the body needed to accept it, and there were 100 ways it could go wrong that Nadia had researched thoroughly and then tried to stop thinking about. He came to find her in the waiting room afterward, pale but upright, his arm in a slight sling where the harvest site was bandaged. "How are you feeling?" she asked, because it was the thing to say. "Fine," he said. "How are they?" "In the procedure now." She looked at him. "You didn't have to stay." "I know. Your company is probably—" "It'll be there," he said, "or it won't, either way." She looked at him for a long time. He looked back. There was a great deal unsaid between them, a whole terrain of it, the years, the choices, the grief, the anger she had not finished having, the questions he had not finished answering. None of that was resolved. None of it was close to resolved. But there was something else here too. Something that didn't have a clean name yet. Something that had to do with the way he'd stood in that hospital room looking at his children and not tried to hide what it did to him. "When this is over," she said, "we need to talk about all of it." "I know," he said. I'm not saying it'll be anything. I'm saying I need to understand what happened." "You deserve to understand what happened." She nodded. They sat in the waiting room, 2 feet apart in silence, and outside the window the city moved through its Thursday like nothing had changed, and in here everything had. 3 weeks later, Dr. Vasquez walked into the room where Kai and Zoe were fighting over the television remote and told Nadia that their levels were responding. The marrow was taking. He said it carefully, with the same measured voice, but his eyes were doing something different this time. This time, the news was good. Nadia cried in the bathroom for approximately 4 minutes. Then she washed her face and went back in and sat between her children and watched them argue about whether dinosaurs or sharks were more dangerous, and she thought, they are going to be okay. She texted Weston 2 words, "It's working." He responded in 10 seconds, "Thank God." Then after a pause, "Can I visit?" She looked at the twins. She thought about all the reasons to say no. She thought about the trauma and the complication and the sheer logistical impossibility of what a relationship between the 3 of them, the 4 of them, would look like from the outside. Then she thought about Zoe's nose and Kai's hands and the dark eyes that she had been looking at for 5 years, half familiar in a way she had never let herself fully examine. "Yes, asterisk," she texted back. "Saturday. Bring the dinosaur book from the list I'm sending you. Kai will never forgive you if you come empty-handed." 3 dots appeared, then noted, "Thank you, Nadia." She put the phone down. Zoe said something. Nadia looked up. "Mom," Zoe said, with the particular seriousness of a 5-year-old who has formed an extremely firm opinion, "I need you to know that sharks are objectively more dangerous and Kai is wrong." "Kai is not wrong," Kai said. "Kai is factually incorrect." "I was there," Kai said, with the logic of someone who had spent 5 years next to their twin. "I know what I know." Nadia laughed. It came out a little ragged, a little overwhelming, and both children stared at her. "Sorry," she said. "I'm okay, keep going." And they did. They were not happily ever after. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. Maybe not in the way that phrase usually means. The past was still the past. Weston had things to answer for, and Nadia had years of building something alone that she wasn't simply going to hand over to someone who showed up at the end. Harlan Crane had withdrawn from the company. Weston had seen to that quietly, and it had cost him politically in ways that would take years to untangle. There were legal arrangements to make and custody conversations to have, and a whole life to renegotiate around 2 small people who deserved a stable one. But on Saturday, Weston came with the dinosaur book, and Kai took it from his hands and immediately began correcting the parts he considered factually imprecise. And Zoe watched the whole interaction from across the room with the evaluating stillness of someone deciding whether she approved. She apparently decided she did, because by the time Weston left that afternoon, She had asked him 3 questions and told him, with the authority of someone who had given this considerable thought, that he was allowed to come back. Nadia stood at the door after he'd gone and Simone said, from the couch, without looking up from her book, "So." "Don't," Nadia said. "I haven't said anything." "You were about to." "I was about to say," Simone looked up, "that Zoe gave him the nod." "Zoe is 5. Zoe has never been wrong about a person in her life." Nadia leaned against the doorframe and looked at her apartment, the books on the shelves, the shoes by the door, the crayon drawings taped to the fridge in a way that was vaguely architectural, the whole small life she had built with extraordinary effort and love and stubbornness. It was hers. That was not going to change. But maybe there was room in it for something new. Maybe, slowly, carefully, with no guarantees and a lot of difficult conversations still to come, something that had started in the worst possible way could grow into something better than either of them could have imagined. Maybe. And now, the question you've all been waiting for. Here it is. Was Nadia wrong to let him in? She needed him to save their lives. She got what she needed, but was letting him back into the twins' world, even slowly, even carefully, the right call? Or should she have taken the marrow and closed the door? Drop it in the comments. Team Nadia, she made the right call, or complicated because life doesn't give you clean answers. Let me know where you stand. And if this story hit you the way it hit me while I was putting it together, if you stayed through every single minute of it, then you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the bell, share it with someone who needs a story today. Because Kai and Zoe made it. And sometimes that's the whole point. See you in the next one.